Hello, everyone. This is Lee Andrews from Akathame, and with us today is Oonie Chase. There are no words to tell you how excited I am and honored that she has agreed to join us today. I know that I've already received a number of questions from everybody, so I will try to get to all of them in our call today. If you have any questions, please post them in LinkedIn or in YouTube, whichever channel you're watching, and we will do our best to get to all of them. If there are any questions remaining, I will shoot them over to Oonie, and I am sure she'll be happy to respond just as soon as she can. So, Oonie Chase.
Hey!
You know, I've known you for a decade now, and what really strikes me is your incredible humility about what you have done in this world and with your profession. So I do want to start with, well, first question, let's talk about your career. I mean, how did you, so we're going to talk about your career, but even before we go there, the purpose, the reason that I asked Oonie to join us today is because Oonie designs with a mission. She has a purpose to everything that she does, and it is based on helping organizations understand the importance of design that has an impact on the world. So that's one thing that we definitely want to cover during this, but let's start with your career, Oonie. Why did you choose this path, and how did you get to where you are today?
Oh my God. I don't know if I really chose this path. I think I discovered this path. It was kind of by accident. It was, in the early days of the internet, and I thought I wanted to be a programmer. Because I was so captivated by this, emerging relationship between humans and computers and everything that could unlock. But it turned out that I was an absolutely catastrophically bad programmer. And so in the teams that I was working on, I got pushed into doing the interface stuff. Oh, give it to Chase. She can make it pretty. Sort of, sexism working in my favor. And that's where it all started, of just, shaping a relationship between what this person was trying to do and the computer systems that can enable them to do it. And that's kind of where it all started. And everything from there was just, I don't think I really had a plan. I just had a curiosity, I think. And I was fortunate enough to be able to just follow that from the marketing space to public sector to startups to advertising, and then now into sort of the design canon of Frog and IDEO.
So it's interesting. Again, your humility is incredible. So when you look at your portfolio of truly remarkable organizations and where you are today, what are some of the skills? And this is kind of where storytelling comes into play, right? And linking business with the design factor, right? How do you tie design to business? What do you think some of those skills are that you possess that other people should really think about? How well am I doing in this area?
That's a big question. That's a really big question. I think I don't want it to sound really trite, but I think listening is a really big skill. I think it comes up a lot. People say you need curiosity, you need empathy, you need listening. But I think listening without an agenda and just kind of being open to what your client or your cohort or your colleagues are saying is a starting place, because you're starting with what that person needs and cares about. And that's kind of your first way into addressing whatever problem it is that they're wrestling with.
That's great.
I think everything, everything kind of comes back to the human in it, if you know what I mean. That I joke that at least 50, if not more % of any brief is a human brief. Like there's some human problem at the center of whatever challenge that you're being put into. And if you get to that, if you address that, that kind of unlocks all of the stuff around it.
So when you are saying 50% or more is part of that brief, you're talking about explaining a creative brief to a client, or understanding or capturing that brief.
If we're talking in like in a services relationship, when your client comes to you with a brief of some kind, 9 times out of 10, there's a human problem at the heart of that brief. Right. And solving that brief is going to involve orchestrating or designing for a human system that brief sits inside of.
Got it. And what are some of the questions that you like to typically use to get at that human element? I mean, sometimes they don't share that, right? They're talking about possibly all the symptoms and not the real problem.
Yeah.
What are some of the questions? My favorite one is why. It's just that simple.
That's the big one. Just keep asking why. Keep asking why. Yep. Yeah. It's like, you know, that myth where like the earth is resting on the back of a turtle and their turtle's all the way down. It's like your brief is resting on a why, and its why is all the way down.
Yeah. So in your current role, tell us what your current role is, and what your responsibilities are, and how, and we're also going to talk about ethics here. And then I promise you, we're really going to get into the storytelling business thing. But cool. What is your current role responsible for?
So I'm what's called an executive portfolio director at IDEO. And so my job is to, well, first I need to describe a little bit about how we're organized. IDEO is organized in a set of sort of practice areas, what we call studios. So there's a group who's just focused on design for learning and educational systems. There's a group that's focused on health. There's a group that just that looks a little bit like a mini management consultant firm that's designed for change. And that's one of the ways that IDEO has been able to grow. So my role is to sit above all of those different studios and to work with clients across the surface area of IDEO.
That's a big job.
It's a fun job. So, it's such a fun job.
Why is it so fun for you? Why do you think that's so fun?
Because I first of all, I get to work with an incredible diversity of clients, which means I'm constantly getting to learn about all these new domains, all these new challenges, these new sectors, which I just find, you know, intoxicating. And then on the other hand, I get to almost cast a team or cast a set of solutions around whatever it is that the client is trying to do, and just be able to work with people who have all these different specialties, and bring them, you know, bring their focus in on that client challenge. It's so fun.
Yeah, I can see why that would become a lot of fun. So let me just make sure that I understand your career path correctly. So you're hands-on design, user experience came into play, creative director, then tapping into the user experience domain, and leadership, always being client-facing in those roles, which I think is huge, right? For a designer to have that at the table conversation with these clients. To now being the person that is the foremost face of IDEO in front of these clients to help them craft the solution. And then you're picking the team to bring that idea to life. Is that right?
Pretty close. Yeah.
Close. What did I miss?
Well, I mean, IDEO is a very communal place. So I'm not the only one picking the team. There's an incredible group of talent folks and managing directors and design directors around me. So
does a managing director bring you into a client, or do you bring the managing director into that client?
So it's a little complex. Each studio, I'll just use IDEO in the Bay as an example. So there's the Design for Change studio, Design for Health, Design for Education, all that. Each of those studios have managing director leadership. And so sometimes I'm working with those managing directors. Sometimes the relationships, because they're not tethered to any one of those studios, they kind of float with me across all of them. IDEO has something called the OS, which is the layer of the organization that I'm in. So as the operating system, we work with those MDs, but also work pretty closely with the talent inside of the studios. Depends on what the client is needing and trying to do.
So now let's tie this to design and business and storytelling. How important is it for a designer at any level and any role to be able to articulate their story, to tell the story, and what kinds of stories should they be able to tell?
It is the most important thing. I mean, it's the only language and story are the only ways we have to really communicate our ideas. So through that lens, it's all you got. So you got to get really good at it. And the better the story, the better you're able to reach people. The wider an audience you can inspire or persuade to your point of view. So storytelling is the jam, man. It's the thing that can move boulders.
It really can. And I think the more convincing you are in that story, the more passion you have about the story you're telling, the better. Yeah. And what are key elements of story? So when you're talking to a client or when you're talking internally to people, what is it that let's start internal. What gets the internal stakeholders on board with your story? What are the elements that we're looking for?
Internal at IDEO or internal in the organization? Oh.
Internal at IDEO, yeah.
I mean, IDEO is a very optimistic, passion-driven place. Mm-hmm. So the stories that I put together are very often about like impact, change, and progress. Here's how this work is going to shift something that's particularly meaningful or interesting in the world, and that's the kind of thing that galvanizes folks at IDEO. I think actually it galvanizes most everybody, who's interested in design. But yeah, like we all imagine a world that doesn't exist yet, right? That's part of our superpower as designers. And the distance between where we stand today and that future is the hard work of bringing that vision into being. And there are going to be times along that journey where we kind of lose steam or lose our vision or lose our confidence or our energy. And it's stories like that of like, why are we doing this? What is the better world that we're trying to shape that keeps us going along that path so that our visions don't just become wishful thinking, right? They become like long-term sustainable realities.
So, and I would love to talk about the characteristics, the traits of good storytellers, but we're not going to go there today. We're going to, because I do think that I think that people have different skills and abilities when it comes to telling that story, right? Oh, yeah. And it takes time and it takes practice. I think that every single person has the ability to tell a story and do it well. I just think it takes time and practice and coaching, right? What I'm really interested in about is where does so you're talking about, I posted something on LinkedIn about 2 weeks ago that said designers can visualize the future. The question is, will greed get in the way of them realizing that future? So how do you work with the IDEO? Is a very idealistic company. They always have been, right? Very grounded in what's the good, right? For the whole, right? So how does that fit? How does designing for ethics over profit or greed come into a designer's? How do you manage that when you are being pushed in one direction and you know that your organization is saying, no, we need to go in this direction? What leverage do we have? I know, not an easy one, right?
Not an easy one. I mean, my knee-jerk reaction is that you cannot lend your integrity to an organization that doesn't share your ethical framework. If you feel like you're compromising that is a human problem. That's not a professional problem, or it becomes a professional problem, but that's a human problem.
Yeah.
But there's lots of gray areas. And in fact, we at IDEO, we have something called the gray area, where, we're being asked to design into a space that is, we're really not sure about. Like, there's some things that are clear, like some territories that, generally speaking, folks do not want to work in. But some spaces are really gray. For example, firearms would seem to be a really clear example of something that you don't want to design. But what do you do if a manufacturer comes to you and they want to make a safety mechanism that is tagged to someone's fingerprint? That is a good thing, right? It's making firearms more safe. So what do you do with that gray area? So I think it's an individual thing, and if hopefully you're working at a firm that allows you to make those choices for yourself without consequence. So if there's something that you feel like you can make a difference in the world working on, but it is a gray area, that you can do it. But if it's in a space that just doesn't align with who you are and what you believe, that you can step away from that.
So I think we just answered the question that someone else had asked. How do you distinguish between doing design in government that goes against your beliefs? So it really comes down, what I'm hearing, it's a personal decision.
On one level it is. There are things, that I think are, oh, this is so challenging.
It is.
Working in government or working at scale, I think is a place where you're working in service of a larger group of people. And government in particular, I think, there's what we vote in every 2 or 4 years. And then there are the civil servants who are working, it's their career, and they're working in service of all of us. So I think sometimes being aware of the tides versus the enduring effort of trying to make a government, trying to make not to come across as a little bit too naive, but we're working towards a more perfect union, all of us together,
Right.
And trying to make sure that you are focused on that versus on some of the vicissitudes. Now, this is another one where it's turtles all the way down. Like, there's no simple answer when we're talking about government, for
Right.
sure.
Do you, well, let's get to the next question.
Yeah, I could talk about this all day.
Go on that one. Here's another question. How are silo structures affecting creative team collaboration, and how can we break those silos down?
Silos are one, as we were saying earlier when we were ramping into this, silos are one of the bugaboos of any collaboration, let alone creative collaboration. but certainly any collaboration that leads to something new inside of an organization. Now, the gift of the silo is that it works for the current goal, the current business, right? It's there for a reason, and it serves something. So one of the ways to start breaking them down is to understanding what it serves, why it's useful for the current organization. So first is that, like, they're there for a reason. It's been designed that way for a reason. So why? Start there. Breaking through those silo structures, I think we often imagine that it is senior leaders who make the decision for those silo structures to break down, but more often is people inside of those structures building bridges between the silos and starting to work together. It's much more of a grassroots thing than it is a top-down thing. I think by the time the leadership groks the power of this, it's been going on for a while. So I think it's wholly in the power of folks who are sitting inside of those silos to start reaching out to people and working and with each other and finding cause and purpose in working together, showing that there is something new and super valuable to come of breaking those silos down a little bit. So showing people what can happen when you break through those silos versus talking about what could happen if you break down those silos is what's going to help those silos shift faster.
So when you're talking about reaching out, you can be talking about anything from how can I help you to here's a resource or hey, let's go for coffee. What are meaningful ways to reach out?
Any of those things, like find people to work with, find a project or find something to do that means that you're working with someone from outside of your organization, not just in a consultative capacity, but in an actual, we're doing a project together and we're working on it. But a lot of those things start with coffee, like just being curious about what's going on over there. Like, what are you working on? How is your silo structured? What's the culture like over there?
So in today's world right now, everybody's remote. What are some ways that we can build, build those bridges? Online coffee like we're doing right now. I mean, you and I have a cup of coffee. So, I mean, it's not that hard, right?
No. And in some ways it's a little bit easier because, we all know where each other are. We're all sitting at home. I mean, not all of us, but so setting up a virtual coffee date or a digital drink or, a tea for 15, 20 minutes. Bizarrely for me, at least, it feels even easier right now to do this than it was before.
Why is that? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I don't know. As soon as that popped out of my mouth, I'm like, why is that? I don't know. There's lots of weird things that are emerging in this post-COVID world. When I had someone the other day want to have a coffee and or a digital coffee, and he called me on my phone as opposed to video call, and I was like, oh, that's weird. But he was going on a walk, so we went on a walk together, and I was like, oh, this is cool. This is new.
Now, did you know that he was going to be walking when you talked to him?
No.
So setting up a remote walk,
Yeah, let's go for a walk. That
actually might work for me. Not that I would insist that anybody call me and say we're going for a walk. I mean, that's just not what I do. But yeah, sure. I'm glad. Did you actually walk with this guy?
No, I was sitting here. Well, I thought it was going to be, I thought we were going to have a video chat. And first I was like, a phone call? What? And then I was like, oh, it's a walk. Oh, how lovely.
Yes, that is lovely. I'm also imagining that you're hearing him breathing heavy as he's walking and hearing the outside noises and all. Was that distracting at all?
No, That was great. Yeah.
Okay. So I've got a question here that came in about user experience. UX has become watered down in many companies. What's your take on that? The other thing is that they want to know how IDEO looks at user experience, which I think many of us, already have a good idea, but please tell.
I'm not sure what this person means by watered down.
So they're asking, so a lot of companies and hiring managers are asking for somebody who does research testing, visual design, prototyping, potentially the UI, one person who does it all, right? They're asking for a laundry and does the development, by the way. So what are your thoughts on that?
I wish we were all unicorns like that. I think that's lazy thinking, to be honest.
What does that mean?
Well, I'm sure you find this where a company will say, we need to hire this kind of person, and use that as a way to almost not see the people who they're interviewing, because the people that you interview rarely fit this like rote description of a job description. We all have a whole bunch of skills that don't neatly fit into any one job description, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I see these unicorn postings where you have to be an expert design researcher and you have to do visual design, you have to do all these things. Like, I've met people who are that badass, but they are not common. And yeah, I just think it just strikes me as lazy. It's like saying we don't know exactly what we want, so we want one person to do all the possible things that we could want them to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you that person?
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I think that there's a laziness to it, but there's also, do they really know what they're doing? Where's the intelligence behind it? And I guess that does boil down to laziness, but also, do they know? Do they have the intellect to know what the differences are, under that UX umbrella and within design? That's always my first question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we have another question that just came in. These are coming to me. By the way, I've noticed that people are sending me direct messages to get their questions through. They don't want them posted publicly. So if you feel uncomfortable posting your question publicly, you can certainly direct message me through LinkedIn or any other way that works for you. Here's another question. I'll post it afterwards. How does IDEO qualify their candidates? Like, if I were to apply to IDEO, what are some of the things that I should think about before even applying to the organization? What should I be able to do?
Oh,
that's an interesting question, don't you think?
Great question.
Because I think they're trying to say they might not be good enough. They want to make sure they're good enough before they apply.
Oh, God. Like, don't wait until you think you're good enough. Because if you're like me, you're an insecure overachiever. So you never actually believe that you're good enough. So don't wait. You are good enough. So go for it. IDEO has the most diverse group of designers I've ever met. And the reason why I say that is because they're so kind of broad in their definition of design that there are folks, who you would expect, people who do, UI design, graphic and brand designers who come out of Pentagram. But you also have environments designers, you have toy designers, you have people whose background are in designing light shows for events. You have people who come out of MBA programs who we call business designers, so we have teachers, we have doctors, we have all these different kind of specialists and experiences who are all coming who are all coming together to work on these, wingnut challenges that we get invited into. So I think the bar is really high, as you might expect. I think sometimes, not sometimes, I know that the culture of IDEO is very well protected, and something that is hired for. So that's another piece of it. It's just not just the quality of your portfolio or the quality of your thinking. It's making sure that you are a collaborative. You are super collaborative. You are super curious. You walk in with a kind of optimistic, open mindset. That you're leading with your curiosity rather than leading with skepticism and critique. But all of us who work there don't act. I think before we worked there, didn't think we were qualified to work there. So if that gives you, hope, or the what's the right word? If that gives you the impetus to apply, then please do.
That's incredible. And so what do you think? We got another question here about DISC. I had a live broadcast about DISC. Are you familiar with that? It's a communications assessment that determines if you are more of a directing person, if your communication style is more of an influencer, if you're more cautious, if you're more, so do you? Yeah. I'm going to say that the answer is no to this question. Does IDEO use any of those types of personality assessments or motivational assessments in that selection process?
They didn't with me. I mean, when I arrived, everyone was super hot to trot about Enneagrams, which I'd never heard of, but it wasn't something I needed to do in order to apply.
Okay. All right, we got a question about design. Let me just see if I've got this. What are the design trends that you're seeing given COVID-19?
Oh God,
yeah. These guys are not asking light questions.
They did not come to play. I think right now, when all of this started, we immediately snapped into this mode of what's changing, what's falling away, what's emerging. We're still in what I think of as the realm of the first order effects of COVID-19, where some things are very, very different and very accelerated, like digital health stuff. Super, super accelerated, as you would expect. It's probably put digital health ahead by like 10 years or something. Digital transformation efforts. I saw this hilarious tweet where someone said, who has driven, what was it? Something like, what has been the defining factor in the success of your digital transformation strategies? And it was like A, the CEO, B, the CFO, C, COVID-19. Everyone was like, circle COVID-19. But I think there's a lot that's still kind of shaking out, like the entertainment, Facebook, Amazon, like those COVID-proof stocks, which I put that in quotes because those aren't my words, and I'm not sure I really believe that yet, are doing super well. But when I say first order, I mean, we're still in the middle of all of this, right. Like the things that we are seeing and experiencing now might just be in response to our being in the middle of it. But certainly, the telehealth stuff, digital health is quite big. Communications, public health communications is another one that we've been pretty heavily involved in. you know, where are people getting good information? How best to communicate that? Those things we've been wrapped into. Trying to think of some of the other things that we've been working on. I think those are the two really big ones.
So it's interesting because the very next question asks, what's the most important high impact project you've worked that should be worked on or are working on? Like, where do you, I'm sure you can't say all the
I was like, I can't tell you.
Is there anything that you can provide, like a high level of?
No.
Okay, let's go on to the next one. So the next question is, Oonie.
Yes.
I love this one. Oonie, what makes you so different than everybody else? And I think what she's trying to say, and this is a quote, I think what she's trying to say is that there is something about you, Oonie. We know that, right? There's certain things, there's certain qualities. This goes back to that original question. What are the qualities that make somebody really stand out? And I think I'm going to answer this one for Oonie, if that's okay. Like, I'm going to act as your personal agent here.
I can't with this right now. It's too early.
I know. It's 8:00 time. I will tell you this answer, having known her, because she is very humble, and I think that's number one. Her humility goes a long way, but her level of intelligence comes from an extraordinary amount of research. I'm sorry, that's one of my neighbor dogs. Comes from an extraordinary amount of research and knowledge when she goes into these rooms and she tells the story. So you've got facts to back everything up. And I also think that your ability to tie not just the human element, but to the business outcome. And I really want to touch on that for the next couple of minutes. What are the business outcomes that you have affected in your career? And I'm so sorry. It's a dog.
Oh, he's a good boy.
Now we've got all the neighborhood dogs. So I love these live broadcasts. So if you can talk about some of the business impact that you have tied your design to, and I think that really answers the question about what is different about leaders in design, is that they can articulate that impact that they make. So if you could talk to us about that, that would be helpful. Even past lives, doesn't have to be IDEO.
Doesn't have to be, okay.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, and you may have seen this, IDEO publishes it, a few other people publish it, are these 3 circles that put desirability, like what the human wants, typically what as UX folks, especially early on in our careers, we really fall in love with and focus on. So there's that desirability piece. There's the business. Is it viable for the business? And then is it feasible from a technological standpoint? And that the real sustainable, like world-changing, well, I won't make it that big. The real sweet spot is the intersection between those 3 things, right? Do humans want it? Is it viable for the business, and is it feasible from a technology standpoint? And if you get that trifecta right, then you're kind of golden. So as a designer and as you move into leadership positions, you're having to balance and take responsibility for all 3 of those domains at the same time. And you need to speak to people on the business side or on the tech side so that you can pull them into your posse of whatever it is that you're trying to do. You have to speak all 3 of those language to put the work that you're doing for the humans in context of the system that it's going to have to work in, if that makes sense. Like you can't, if you just go after one of those, then it's just wishful thinking, right? Like if it's just technologically feasible, like we can do it, doesn't mean that you should do it. We all know what like runaway business, sort of just doing it for the business means, and also just doing it for humans. If it's just something that someone wants, it doesn't mean that it's the right thing. So how do you balance those three things together?
Interesting. And no one is more important than the other. They're all of equal importance. Is that right?
I mean, we all have a favorite child, right?
That's true.
So I think that if people really love something, it's not just that they desire it, but if they fall in love with it, then it can move mountains. Like, it will change businesses. It will change the technology that delivers it. My favorite story along these lines is something that was told to me about the Sydney Opera House, that when it was first awarded, it was awarded to a guy who just drew this kind of gesture sketch of the roof. It just showed, like, here's what the roof of that was going to look like. And at the time, they didn't have the materials or the math to make that roof stand. And so Ove Arup, who was a structural engineer at the time, came up with a whole new set of materials, a whole new way to build in order to make that floaty gesture sketch a reality. And that's an example of people falling in love with something, in this case, something incredibly beautiful. And then the technology and the materials and the organizations kind of rising to meet that and bring something entirely new into the world.
Interesting. What's more interesting is that somebody must have channeled that response, because the next question is, do you believe that users know what they want, or do designers know better?
Oh.
So, I mean, if Steve Jobs were on this right now, he'd say, I know better.
Yeah.
The user isn't there yet. The user can't conceive the future until it arrives, right? That would be his take. What do you think?
I think, we talk to users for a reason, right? Because there's a pattern that emerges from what they do or what they say, that shows us that something better is possible. So the wisdom of the users or the wisdoms of the humans is, I try and avoid the word users because it just sounds so bloodless, but there's wisdom there. And watching them, seeing their patterns, like, that's where you find the good stuff. Yeah. Individually, though, users don't always know what they want. They may have a sense of what they want, like if a designer I worked with once, I don't know if it was her quote or her quoting someone else, but she said, like, every person you talk to would want flying sneakers. Like, they want sneakers that can help them fly. Of course we do, right? But yeah, but maybe not. So I think the role of the designer is to look at the patterns and to solve for a larger group that doesn't always answer to a specific request of a single user. So I think we're decoder rings in a way between what humans want or need or desire. Again, going back to that framework, what the business can sustain or how the business needs to grow, and what the technology can do.
Well, we've got less than a minute left, but I do want to say that this answers the question that my mother has had at 90 years old. She still drives. She lives on her own, and she is quite independent and is happy in her circumstances. However, she has two issues. She can't buy a new car because she says they are not designed for old ladies. They're too high tech, and she can't vacuum her house the way that she wants to, because she can't lift the the attachment, because it's too heavy. So at what point do we stop designing for a certain generation? Do we stop designing for a group, or because that in her perspective, that's how she sees it. She sees this to me, you've stopped, you young people, I'm not even close. You young people are not designing for us anymore.
She is 100% right. That I think the elderly is the least one of the least served populations of design.
Yeah.
Predominantly because I think the companies we design for fetishize the younger audiences. Yeah. But like the wisdom and the capital and the experience and the seasoning of our elders is, I think, is a new frontier, or should be a new frontier of design. I think Donald Norman had an article recently where he was like, what the F, people? Like, did I not tell you anything about design? And here I am walking in the world as an elder, and all of this stuff is just shiza for me and what I'm trying to do.
Yep, he did. And he had actually a broadcast on that not long ago. And I reached out to him after that, and he said, your mother's not wrong.
No, she's not.
Your mother's not wrong. So how do we fix that? I mean, really and truly, this should be a big story. You know, if you look at AARP is the largest association, multi-billion dollars, right? Association and company of people over the age of 50. So this is a viable market.
Everyone deserves the dignity of design. Everyone does. And I think, again, this is a place where, as designers, we can shine a light on that. Again, because we're the ones who are imagining this world, this better world.
Yeah. So do you think that, I mean, Oonie, this is a big lift. It's a big lift. This COVID has really forced the hand of humans, right? Of humanity and of mankind. So it'll be interesting to see where our story takes us from here. That's for sure. So we got lots of good takeaways from here. I'm going to bullet some of the key things that Oonie said, because I think that they are very important, especially when preparing your design case and bridging across an organization to break down those silos, and then making sure that we believe that everybody deserves the dignity of good design. So, Oonie, thank you so much for joining us at 8 o'clock in the morning, your time. And if you would hang on for just a second after this call, hold on. We've got one more question, and I think it's an important one. Has IDEO ever addressed the issues connected to diversity, equity, and inclusion for clients in the private or public sector? Let me just copy, paste.
All the time.
She doesn't have any typos in hers. I'll copy and paste that. Go ahead.
All the time. All the time.
Are you able to show an example?
Oh.
It's early, Christina.
There's a whole team who's focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I don't know if this woman follows Sandy Spiker, who is our new CEO. Well, not new, I guess she's a year in. But this is a core part of how she designs in the world, and how she is asking IDEO and the companies that work with us to take this on. It is, I don't want this to come across wrong, but it's very easy for companies to say that we are about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and very hard for them to put their money where their mouth is, and to really, really be about that in an embodied way, as opposed to in intellectual or in a storytelling way, if you know what I mean. And so these shifts happen at the organizational level. So it's stuff that our Design for Change group works a lot on, like what are the structures and biases and privileges that are encoded into an organization's structure, their incentives, their everything, that make it impossible for them to make good on this promise.
Culture.
It's culture. Yeah. And organizational cultures are not always the friend of diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm not going to get specific, but I've worked in contexts that, I have been told that I am a diversity hire as a woman. And, but that is, and that ticks the box of what they need to do for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Woman on staff. Tick.
I'm speechless. So I think you're right. I think that there's a lot of lip service that happens around this diversity, equity, inclusion. I also think that, again, if there's an upside to a pandemic, this was one of them. My neighbor she is over the age of 60, and she has been begging her company, which is a quasi-government organization, to work from home a couple of days a week. Isn't it funny that after 25 years, they found a way to make that happen since COVID?
Isn't that wild? Huh.
Isn't that something? And I think that as another person who's an expert on DEI was on one of our previous broadcasts, says companies are going to be very hard pressed to put this genie back in the bottle. That working remotely is and always has been an option. It has always been a management issue and a cultural issue. So on that fun note, we really are going to end this now. The time has gone very fast, and thank you very much, Christina, and everybody else who has given Oonie all these questions. So early in the morning, she said, you didn't come to play. Thank you.
You did not.
Much for sharing your story with us and for giving us some inspiration and motivation to apply for those jobs and stop thinking less of ourselves. Stop that right now. You are good. Move. Just do your thing. All right. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. And until next week, have a great weekend. Take care. Stay on, Oonie.